Hi, this is Dustin with Dustin's Dollars. Today I'm going to be talking about NextDecade, talking about the progress that they have made towards achieving a positive FID, a final investment decision, on the Rio Grande LNG export facility. This is answering a question I got on one of my prior videos from DEFCON 2. He or she said, what do you think are the odds of Rio Grande LNG being approved for construction? I'm long tail, but been looking at next. Thanks. And so I wanted to respond there. I said just a little bit here that I think the odds are good. And so this is the bottom line. If you just want my quick answer, I think the odds are good if they can sign one to two more of these 20-year sales agreements. And again, I think that's likely given the macro environment. And if that happens, I think they're going to be a great position for financing. And so I'm going to talk about this in more detail today. Before I begin in earnest, let me remind you that I am not a financial advisor or a financial professional of any sort. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and do not represent those of any company or any other individual. I currently hold a long position in NextDecade, and in case I mentioned Tellurian as well, I hold a long position in Tellurian. So this video should be for your entertainment purposes only, because I could be wrong about everything I say in this video. You need to do your own research before making any investment decisions. That being said, what I want to do real quick, this will be brief, is go over what do they need in order to achieve a positive final investment decision, right? Going through the basics, they need a suitable site. Check, right? They have this site. They have a lease for this 984 site from Brownsville. They're good there. They need somebody to design and build a facility, and that's a check. They have a contract with Bechtel to build. That they're designing it, and they're going to, or they have the contract where they have the option to have Bechtel build it for them. And this is back in 2019, and they are at the current moment. If I scroll somewhere through here, you can see that they stated that they are 30% of the way through the engineering. It's right here. It's a little note in their presentation. The engineering has been completed at 30%, which is the most they can do before they actually start construction. So big check mark on that one. They need a source of gas. Check. They have the Rio Bravo pipeline that was originally part of their plan, and then they sold it to Enbridge, but they're going to have rights to that gas for 20 years. And it's going to be 4.5 billion cubic feet per day, which is enough to feed the entire 5-train facility once they get up to 27 million tons per year. So big check mark on a source of gas. Then they need permits to actually let them build the facility and actually export the gas. And they got all of that. The last thing they needed, this is a partial check mark. So they got all the permits they needed in roughly 2019. They got the approval from FERC in the late 2019. And then in early 2020, they got this final bit, which was the non-free trade agreement export authorization from the Department of Energy. So at that point, they were fully permitted, as far as I know. And then they also got the state stuff and everything. There has been an amendment, and I've mentioned this in the past, where they refiled with FERC. FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I think. I could be wrong on that, but that's gives you the general idea. They did file an amendment here. I actually have it open. But this is to add on carbon capture. So they were already fully permitted with the original Rio Grande LNG export facility. They added an amendment here so that they can capture carbon and add their carbon capture system to the facility. And this is something they are including in their current design and their current investor projections that they have in terms of cash flow, because that does actually give them some additional cash flow because of the carbon credits. This amendment, they do state in their presentation that they expect to get approval from FERC in 2022. I have no inside information on this and no really informed opinion, other than to say, politically, it seems weird if they would deny an amendment that's adding on a carbon capture system to a facility that's already been fully permitted, that is allowing them to liquefy the natural gas. So To me, it seems likely, but again, I have no particular inside information. I don't understand the intricacies here. So that is a risk. I think I personally estimate it to be a fairly small risk, given what the amendment is that they are now asking for in terms of the change. Then all of those things are the initial dominoes, but the last domino you need is obviously the money to build the facility, and that's a big one. And I've covered this a little bit. I don't know if it has all the most up-to-date information from my last video that I talked about NextDecade, but they do have about 60% of their trains 1 and 2 volume, which would be the minimal phase 1 that they could do for their facility, at least as currently designed. They have about 60% of that capacity already sold. And they have the overview here, the 15-year contract, and then these 20-year contracts. And I've gone over this in the past where most of these are indexed to Henry Hub. The sales agreement with Shell was partially linked to oil, if I recall correctly. So not exclusively Henry Hub, but largely most of these I think are linked to Henry Hub prices, to U.S. gas prices. So that is where they stand, and they have this nice graphic here which shows you, hey, they've contracted this much of their trains 1 to 2 volume. That's at 60%. And so now this is the big question is, are they going to be able to get the money to build the facility? And I think, I'm not an industry insider, so I don't have a great understanding of this, but from observations on other facilities, it seems like 60% would be a little bit low in terms of capacity locked up for them to be able to build those, to get the financing to build the facility so far. So I think the next step is they need to, and they actually call this out. This isn't groundbreaking. They say their next step is to get additional sales and purchase agreements, and then that will let them actually get the money, get the financing. However, I don't think that they're going to need to contract out the full 11.7 million tons per year in terms of their sales agreements in order to get financed. I think just like we saw with Tellurian and you see with other facilities, somewhere around the maybe 75%, 80% of the capacity needs to be accounted for to show enough cash flow for the future to actually fund the facility. And if you do the math, if they got, I think, another 1.5 million tons per year locked up in a contract, they would be at about 70% of their volume locked up. I think if they had a 2 million tons per year contract, then it would be more like 75%. And that is probably in the vicinity of where they could then go actually get financing. And so the first domino to fall in order for them to actually achieve FID, I think, is they need at least one more sales and purchase agreement. It sort of depends on the size. But if they can get one that's at least 1.5, maybe even 2 million tons per year, they are probably looking pretty good. And just speaking on that for a second, I do think that's likely given the current macro environment. I think people who want LNG have noticed that the market are watching the market, obviously, and they are going to be pretty happy to lock up some future supply under contract and not necessarily have to be at the whims of the market. And for that matter, they are also able to, what NextDecade is doing that, in contrast to Tellurian they are not doing, is selling the LNG indexed at US gas prices at Henry Hub. And so for purchasers of LNG, this, depending on what the commodities do in the future, could represent a significant discount off of what they would be paying in Asia, in Europe, at spot LNG prices. So that is also, I speculate, pretty attractive to folks who are going to have a long-term need for LNG. And NextDecade has their own version of this. Tellurian has their own version of this. There's tons of these floating around. Analysts' presentations basically saying the market does not have enough LNG, especially when you take Russia out of the picture. You need a lot more LNG capacity over the 5 to 10 year time span. And that's this light blue here is the replacement of Russian gas supply, and that's a humongous gap. So when you ask yourself how likely is it they're going to be able to sign another sales and purchase agreement, that is a lot of what goes into my estimation of thinking it's pretty likely. So all that being said, let's say they do get another sales and purchase agreement for lock up some additional capacity for the facility, and so they can expect future cash flows from that. Now when they go to a bank, they have what I think are two positive aspects given their contracts that will help them out with financing. One is the length of the contract. We're looking at 15 and 20-year contracts here that they've signed. Those give a longer time period for the banks to actually then project out that these folks are going to be able to pay their bills and pay back that financing. So I think that is a major positive. Another aspect of this is their contracts are indexed to Henry Hub. And that is in contrast to what Tellurian has sold their contracts at, where those are indexed to the actual LNG, JKM, and TTF prices. The positive that I think this has for financing for NextDecade is it's easier for banks to understand what the cash flows are going to be, since the Henry Hub is both an index on their that's what is correlated to their revenue and also correlated to their costs, right? Because they're going to have to purchase the upstream gas on those Henry Hubs. So they can effectively be looking at this as a spread, and you can get much more reliable projections what the cash flows are going to be, because the Henry Hub goes crazy high, their revenues are also going to go up. And if it's very, very low, their revenues, their costs are going to go down, sort of in tandem with their revenue. So I think that is a positive aspect. And so that is sort of how I see things. The other thing that when you are thinking about the company, right? So those are the dominoes that would need to fall, and they even state themselves that they believe that they are going. They've said that there are additional negotiations for sales and purchase agreements, which I believe, and then they think they're going to get at least a 2-train FID in the second half of 2022. I don't really take the company's projections and expectations to mean very much, because they've made many such statements over the past. It hasn't happened. I think you just need to evaluate this for yourself. I mean, my personal opinion is that seems credible at this point in time, but not because they're saying it, because of all these other factors, because of, me coming up with my own sort of thought process of what could happen here. It seems likely. The one thing that I wanted to mention, and this is a little bit past the are they going to reach FID for their first 2 trains, is their costs for future trains, for future LNG capacity, is going to be lower. So if they do achieve this, right, I'm thinking of the dominoes that fall, right? They get a sales and purchase agreement, which is the first domino to fall. Then that lets them unlock and get financing. And then that domino falls and they actually get the money, and then they can make a positive investment decision on the first 2 trains. Now, all of a sudden, they can start to look at it where they're making even more profits on trains 3 and 4 and 5, because the cost per ton for each of those effectively goes down, because their plan for the first 2 trains, right? It's listed here. I'm zoomed in too far. You see the whole statement, but the first 2 train work plan includes the full site preparation. So that's going to reduce the cost per ton for the remaining trains. So they're going to be able to sign. They're going to be able to give larger discounts if they want, or just to capture higher profit if they're signing agreements for the same end purchase price for trains 3 and 4 and 5. So that's going to put them in a very good position if they do, as I think it is likely, achieve FID on those first 2 trains. And so that's how I am thinking about the company, that effectively they're likely to hit that FID for trains 1 and 2. And then if they do, they're even more likely to get trains 3, 4, and 5 going, because they are going to be in a much more advantageous position for those trains versus where they were for numbers 1 and 2. So that is, I think, everything I want to go over. Hopefully that answered your question, DEFCON 2, in enough detail. If you still have any other questions, if that left something that is unclear to you, let me know. I'd be happy to do my best to try to answer it. If there is anyone else out there who is watching, still watching. I do these videos usually live. I checked right now. There's nobody on the live chat at the moment, or no comments at least. I do these videos live usually around 10 or 11 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. So if you are interested, feel free to watch and hop on around those times when I'm able to go live. And I usually do these. Try to hit it Sunday through Thursday evenings. I don't get every day, but that is my intent, is to at least try every evening, Sunday through Thursday. I take off Friday and Saturday usually because something else is going on. So that is everything I wanted to cover today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.